concerns today? Seeing none. Everyone did receive a copy of the prior meeting minutes. Any concerns, objections?
No objections.
Considered approved. Perfect. Moving right along. I'm going to move item 4, the McKinley Woods Park, up in front of the report for the PrAC meeting. So we'll jump on that conversation right now. I know we have some residents here who want to speak on behalf of that. I know this has been conversation at the council and as well as Recreation Committee, and that there's been talks of this park for a while. If you guys would like to come up, any one of you right now, or
I'll go first.
okay. So as you're coming up, just to give an idea of what at least my intention is with this park is to keep it a more passive park with a either just a walking path in there, something small, simple, not anything crazy extravagant. No, I wouldn't want to put personally. I don't want to speak for the other committee members, but I believe that this is how we pass this when we change it to park, is to keep it a passive park that wouldn't have ball fields, soccer fields, anything that's going to be an attractive for field use or anything like that. But feel free to, if you'd like to.
I'm right here.
If you want to, we just need your name and address.
I'm Joanne Elmore, and I live at 2292 Cokewater, Branson. And we purchased our property, we purchased that lot in 1995. And at that time, we were assured that the woods behind our house would remain undeveloped, which is why we purchased it and paid $10,000 extra for the lot.
When you say you were assured, do you mind just telling me who assured you? Just so I.
We didn't actually, we had a realtor, but we didn't go for a realtor. We went to Dole,
Okay.
who was the developer of that subdivision.
Okay.
And that's why we bought that lot, because we've been told the man that owned the property did not want it developed. He wanted it to remain sort of a mini area for animals, and that's what we wanted too. So we went and did it. And over the years, there have been a lot of animals in that thing, that just an abundance of wildlife. And, we had a peacock that lived there for about 10 years. And those of you who live by remember the peacock, I'm sure. But we just don't want to see that land developed and disturbed in any way that's going to affect the traffic, the parking, anything in the neighborhood. We have problems with that already. And I know that a letter was sent to City Council, which I wasn't aware of until yesterday. We had been aware, but my husband and I would have signed the letter. But we concur with everything that's listed in that letter, and those are our concerns. So we just ask that you reconsider the decision to change that.
So there isn't, I don't think there's an intent to change the woods back there either. We want to try to keep it as natural as possible, but to at least allow for some sort of path that can meander through there.
But if you turn it into a park, that opens up the possibilities of parking lots and disturbance of making trails. It's not a very big area. I'm sure you're aware of the size of it.
And Bridget, can you give us just if you know this, just kind of a brief history of how this became city land?
Yes, I was actually here at the time. This really started, the conversation started back in 2015 with the developer of Hawthorne, which is Dr. Mark Rich. And he was interested in developing the subdivision that is now Hawthorne. And there were conversations with city staff at the time regarding utilities, infrastructure, movement of traffic between this new subdivision that would, front on Fort Meigs and on Roachton Road, how it would get attached to McKinley Woods, which are several sub-streets in McKinley Woods, purposefully put there so that as development happened, those streets, which I think are Dwyer and Ringgold, if memory serves me, would then go through into the next subdivision because that property had been zoned, the general property had been zoned for residential development. When he approached us, he was finalizing his initial plat, if I recall correctly. It has been 7 years ago almost. And we actually, some on council may remember, I don't remember Councilman Van Hoosen, we were on council, Councilman Smith, but we actually did a land swap, the city did, with Dr. Rich, to make property more conducive to not only his development, but to make the property that the city owned larger so that there wasn't like extra strange pieces of green space throughout that subdivision, but that it was kind of all contiguous to the existing city property, which includes the woods. And at that time, our whole parcel, I think, was 17 acres. of which 2/3 of that is wooded, 1/3 was farmed. And then what we did is we paired up with Dr. Rich and swapped land, and he gave us like another 3.5 to 4 acres to the east of our parcel going towards Fort Meigs Road, as well as there was land on maybe the south end of the property that the city owned. And it kind of forms a shape, and I'll forgive my drawing if you want this, but certainly not known for that here in the city. I have others more capable. So I think this is Ringgold, so this is Dwyer. Those kind of connect, come down.
We throw Fort Meigs Road on there, if you know, just for a reference.
Can do. Fort Meigs. and-
Stop signs.
Yeah. So speed bumps. Let's see, and our property now goes kind of like. So I want to say, and I'm probably gonna get Ringgold and Dwyer mixed up, so forgive me. So essentially, so this, and then Hawthorne extends down to Roachton. So Fort Meigs, Roachton, and this is the wooded area. I'll cross-hatch that. So that's the wooded area. The rest of this parcel comes over to this dotted line. That's always been city property. So in part of the land swap, we gave up, I don't know, maybe something over here, but we gained some property here, and we gained this down here. And the plan had been with Mark Rich, that was approved by city council, there's an agreement, I believe, is that Ringgold is gonna get extended through and connect up with, I think, Woods Edge?
Yes.
If I remember correctly?
Brody sent me a map of all this, I should have.
Oh, good, oh, his drawings are way better than mine.
Yeah.
And then Dwyer is also gonna extend through, and then we asked Dr. Rich to leave what we'll call like the width of, not even quite a standard city road, in between two houses along here where he'll develop, and that would be access point for a car to go into like a small parking lot somewhere within the city-owned property.
So where would the parking lot be? Because I actually haven't seen, can you show me that?
Yeah, the parking lot, we'd always anticipated, if this was ever developed, would be on the east end,
Okay.
where the farm field is currently today.
All in our backyard.
Yeah. And then there's like this odd little stub down here that would be between houses for like a pedestrian walkway from within the neighborhood to get into this, now zoned park.
So the stub street there's gonna be two stub streets
There's
that are gonna go through, but
Yes, one will actually go
But
through the woods.
will
up
the
to
access,
west.
will the access to the parking be from Hawthorne, or will it be from
It'll be
Woods?
from within Hawthorne off Dwyer, because Dwyer will extend into Hawthorne.
It'll be on both ends.
But where's the park, relative to where the stub street comes down into Hawthorne?
So this
Where's
right
the
here
parking?
going straight
Yes.
down, this will go right through and it won't stop anywhere. This will come down and right in this area is where he has,
Okay.
and we have an easement from Mark Rich for vehicular access, if we choose to use it.
Okay.
So he granted us that as part of this land swap that we worked out with him. Actually, city council worked with that, out with him, that's 2015, 2016, somewhere in that neighborhood. And at the time, the property was zoned scenic, and I think there was conversation on council at the time about rezoning it to park. But I think the council at that time said, let's leave it as is until, future years and future conversations come about, because this area of Hawthorne still is not built. I mean, so this road down through here does not exist at this moment in time, nor does Ringgold that goes through, that will eventually go through the wooded area. That's a really bad drawing, I feel bad.
No, that's actually really good.
I'm not sure that's Mr. Walters.
Yeah,
So it's gonna go down and then go that way.
I guess that's where the,
So,
So this is the stub street.
yeah, so it's gonna come, and I would assume the parking is going to be, is it gonna be on the west side of that stub street? Is that what you're thinking? Kind of abutting the woods?
It would
No, it's gonna be on
be
the other side.
on the east side.
It'll be on Dwyer.
they're talking about it.
Well, I know, I'm talking about the west side of Dwyer, or east side of
East side,
Dwyer.
east
It would
side.
be on the east side of Dwyer.
Okay.
It'll be on the west side.
Well,
Dwyer would come through here.
It would be on the parking would be on the west side of
Well,
the.
Or west side,
This,
okay.
this is probably, I don't know, this
This
might not
is-
be the one that was approved, this might be the initial,
That's fine, it just,
that might be the initial.
but it's still
document.
coming down here, and
Yes.
then are you envisioning parking in here?
There would be a street, a little access road that somewhere in here could be, space for like 6, 7 cars.
Okay, and are we, I know we are, so right now I understand that money we allocated is just to explore design options, right?
Correct.
Okay. And I would assume part of that will be the parking lot and
It would be looking-
whether there's gonna be a buffer between, your backyard, so to speak, and the.
I think in my vision for it, and again, this is just something that, as we go through the exploration side of this, I really want you guys to be involved in that portion of it with the committee. I'm looking at Bridget, as I say that so typically when we do something like this, there's I don't know, what do you call it, steering committee?
It could be a steering, yes, could be a steering committee and
And I think that these residents should have some involvement with that. So that way we can try to find some sort of use with this, but keep it as passive and as natural as possible.
Can I?
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest problems that we're all having with this is that, was it 2-3 years ago, we all attended the planning committee, planning commission, I should say, meeting, and we raised our concerns. And during that meeting, it was voted 6-0 by the planning commission to keep it as S1.
2014 also.
And it's 2014.
There's 2 meetings in 2014 that we met, and at that time, this is when the idea of Trimble Road going.
Your name and address for the record, I'm sorry.
And
And I need everyone who talks, so that way we can have it for the record, sorry.
I'm the guy,
Okay.
2306 Concord, and I, like Joanne, found out about this through Facebook and just recently, so I did not know. But I've lived on Concord since 1995. I was there when, matter of fact, our lot was sold to us for $5,000 extra, so we had the privilege of being by the woods. The old development, the people who sold it to us indicated that the woods would not be developed. That's why we chose it. I asked specifically, and then they said, well, we would love to have the property, but right now it belongs to the farmer who will not sell to us. They put the side streets in anyway, because their hope was someday to be able to get that property. Howald, when he gave the property to the city, it was with the understanding with the current city council members at the time that he wanted it designated scenic, undeveloped natural state. And I don't remember the year, but obviously it was before all this other stuff. It was very early on. So we had decided at that point to put an addition onto our home. Our current home now, with the addition, sits 30 feet from the woods. So it's very close. So in 2014, we got the notice that there was going to be a meeting about the woods being developed, and we're like, no, that was supposed to be designated scenic. We found out later that Howald never filed the proper paperwork to have it stay scenic. And I don't know if that involved money that he didn't want to spend or what, but I remember in the Messenger Journal article, it was like this trust with the city that they would keep it scenic the way he wanted it to. He came from a family conservationist. I understand his children sold the property to Hawthorne Development. But the family itself has given other land with conservation in mind, so that's what this was supposed to be. Fast forward to 2014, we get this notice. I went to 2 different meetings regarding this scenic development of the woods that they wanted to turn into park. We went through the whole thing with them then, and they said, well, the road's going to go through the woods. And we were fighting that because it was going to take a good portion of the woods to put a road there with the sidewalks on the side. And finally, after the second meeting was over, we were told, well, it's too late. We already made the agreement with the developer to put the road through on Ringgold.
through the woods, and it would take the woods. But we would design it such that we would give, and this, is it River Ridge, the other property there?
I believe it is. Yeah.
Okay. They would design the roads so that the people backing up River Ridge to the woods would get some of the woods, and the into properties, the corner property, the property next to me, the road would kind of make this long curve and then go straight to give them a little bit of the woods. And when I looked on the development map with the residents, even in Hawthorne, coming on Ringgold, that would be going into the woods, those properties there in Hawthorne, they're 154 feet deep, and about the same in properties that would back up to Ringgold Road. It looked like from the map that was shown for Hawthorne. So we got the idea it was going to remain scenic. This is 2014, but there was nothing we could do about the road, but they would not develop the park. They would make it would remain natural. And that's after 2 meetings, 2014. Then in 2019, we get a notice that there's going to be a designation to change this into a park, where they were looking at it, and I'm like, how could this be happening again? We went through this in 2014. And so we was there at the meeting. I spoke at the meeting. And after that, we ended up, the council, or the planning committee, I guess it was, zoning and planning, voted 6-0 because our arguments were so persuasive as to the impact it would have on us that they decided to make it a scenic designation. That was the last I heard of it. They were 6-0 decisive. And so we thought, finally, we've got it now, where it's going to stay scenic 1, and there will not be any sort of park there. People now in the neighborhood can go through there. Some of the kids play in there.
I saw it go
But
through
it's
all
not
park.
intrusive because it's not a lot. It's just a few kids here and there. And because my side of the woods is always flooded, a lot of that goes to the far side, closer to Hawthorne. So we don't really see the impact of it being natural. If you put a parking lot there, you're inviting people in. You're inviting people from all over the community. And I know the Saddlebrook has a park in the middle of their subdivision, but there's no parking lots inviting people from all around the community to go in there.
I think Saddlebrook is
Saddlebrook's in the township.
in
that's-
township.
Okay, but still, it's a development that has a park in it. There's no parking lot inviting outside people in.
I don't think that.
So I read a comment about, someone made about this would be new for the city. We don't have any walking trails through the woods. Well, first of all, there's not going to be enough of the woods. It's not that deep.
It's a tiny little
It's a
sliver
tiny-
of woods. It's not large.
To have a walking trail through there, when you consider the invasion of privacy, the traffic that would come through there near our homes, and then the fact that you're not even going to get a good walking trail in there, the woods isn't even that dense in some places. So many trees have fallen. So the idea that you're going to open that up, it's just very intrusive, and it goes against everything we were promised and told for all these years. Me, since, at least 2000, I've lived there since 1995. So there's just not enough. And then if you put a parking lot on the side that these people on Coke Court can see the parking lot and the people outside their backyards who can see directly into their backyards, there's just not a lot of room there without that being very invasive. So I think the idea of the park has been made up to be a lot more than what it really is. And on top of it all, we know that the Pratt Park has been donated, will be, not donated, but it will be designated, and the city will purchase whatever the purchase amount was. They have this massive park that will butt on the other side of Hawthorne. So I'm sure there'll be plenty of walking trails through there when it gets developed. Meanwhile, this little piece of ground does house wildlife. That's beautiful. It's part of our value of living there. And it just seems like the trade-off for what you guys want to do just isn't worth it for what it actually is and what it does for the residents here. Traffic's another issue. We've had many meetings about this, talked about it on Cove Court because it's the main thoroughfare. And the people of Hawthorne will have another way out through River Ridge. That's going to be connecting. It looks natural to connect it there. But we've had 2 cars through the years total being parked in front of our house, which were paid for. We had to go, insurance doesn't cover the cost of that. It's a loss to us to have that happen. So it just seems like creating more opportunity for traffic.
So that troubles me, I guess, currently. Do you guys have any ideas on do you want like a speed monitor out there to help with that? Or are there any? So we have extra surveillance out
There
there.
was a bus driver speeding through there today. He had an empty bus. He was leaving the subdivision, went right through our street, and it was more than 25.
When they connect the wire too, can you imagine how many of the Hawthorne residents are gonna come out through there to avoid the train tracks? I mean, it's gonna.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's gonna be
And
unbelievable.
not only that, but you can't hardly get out in the morning. I remember a time, I'm retired now, but when I was working, I go through the back way to get out the back way instead of Cove Court because you just couldn't get through it.
Yeah, and if you are gonna consider doing this, I would be surprised if the traffic study didn't find that you need the light at Cove Court and Fort Max Road. Just give.
Good luck on Saturday mornings, all those runners coming through.
Yes.
It's just, the whole thing is so disruptive.
I do have a question. I hear the word development with this. What is the neighbors thinking that is being developed with this?
Well, at this point, we understand from what you've said that it's going to be a passive park.
Mhm.
I'm not quite sure what that means. I'm
Passive is
hoping
keeping
that
it scenic.
scenic, okay, but when you talk about putting walking trails through there, versus not having walking trails, people, if they really want to walk through there, they could just kind of just find their way through, and it's an adventure, at least few of the neighborhood kids think so. But when you put a walking trail through, we are in a walking neighborhood. People walk all morning, all evening through our neighborhood, but they're using the sidewalks that go around the subdivision. You put a parking lot there, you're inviting more people in. But you're also, if you put walks through the woods, that invites all these walkers who are now going to Rivercrest or to Wilbury Park to do their walking. That invites them we can just go in our neighborhood. And it just increases the volume of people at our back door.
I would also say, Russell Mills, 2202 Cove Court, I would say that, while the park itself might be passive, the externalities it creates are not. I think the added traffic that we're talking about, the parking lots in our backyards, and I would also say you have Rivercrest right down the street, and that's what I think baffles so many of us is we don't go to Rivercrest, we don't walk there. It's one of the perks of living where we do, right? We have the scenic area in the back of our house, but we have Rivercrest a walk away. And I imagine the Hawthorne people, I know many of them who go there too. So I'm just confused that, the added, to me, the marginal value of this park isn't enough.
So let me, I guess I want to give you just a little insight on how I view this, because it's going to be different than yours from being outside the neighborhood, and I can appreciate being a part of a neighborhood and having some of those issues as well. I know I live in a development as well, and the traffic scares me when roads are going to connect and things like that, so I can really appreciate that. But we're talking about city-owned property at this point, and I get there's a history there that I wasn't a part of, and I can respect that. So the way I see this is we're at a point in time where it's city property, and us three, and it's going to be a little different than planning commission, who it sounds like you're in front of, are elected by the entire city. So we have somewhat of a duty to not just focus on individual neighborhoods, but how can we use this property that we're maintaining to a certain respect, and utilize it for the entire community, okay? So the one thing that's unique about McKinley Woods is that it's wooded, okay? And I haven't been out there to walk the woods, I'm not gonna pretend like I have. I can see it from Roachton Road when I'm driving by, and that's my general idea of it. I know I've been on the other side when I've gone through Co-Court to visit people. Hold on one second. So I think what we're exploring is an opportunity to, hey, how can we plan for something or explore an option? That's where we're at. We allocated money to explore an option with a steering committee, which we would want you guys to be an integral part of. And I know we've already discussed some of the parking issues of making it very minimal parking, because I don't think we have a lot of land there. But really, this is going to be more of a resource, hopefully in the long run, for your subdivision. Or at least we're exploring that. That's what this money is for. If we're voting to allocate the ARPA funds to explore that design, it doesn't mean we're gonna adopt that design. We'll still have to vote for a final design, and that will be after it goes through a committee where you're gonna see consultants come in and give presentations. We're doing that right now with Orleans Park. I just sat in on one of those meetings, and I think once you have the opportunity to kind of sit down there, you may have an epiphany. Maybe you won't, but you may have a, hey, this could be pretty cool and be a resource to the city. I think that's where we're at. At least that's where I'm viewing it, and I'm trying to see something that was donated to the city, make it so we're not getting rid of the animals. I think if we're cutting down woods, we're making a mistake. We don't have that feature. That's why it's of interest. And how can we make this resource usable? And I get that Rivercrest is right there with a walk. I don't want this to be a walking path, so to speak. It sounds like it's not big enough to do the mile walks that you'd want to do at Rivercrest and things like that. But this is going to be hopefully exploring a different type of resource for the community. At least that's how I view it. And part of that money that we're setting aside is to address the issues that you guys are worried about. And hopefully through that process, you're feeling heard and you get that input of, hey, how can we improve that area for you guys as well? At least that's how I take it at this point.
I have two comments. One I think is that we feel blindsided by the process, right? When we left that committee meeting in 2019 with the planning commission, it was very clear, 6-0 in favor. It then went to another committee that none of us were aware of. Not a one of us were at that meeting. Your planning committee, your city council.
The planning zone.
Planning commission.
Well, the planning commission.
It started with the planning commission, with the planning.
Planning commission was 6-0, no. Went to the city council's planning committee, which then overturned it 3-0, and then there was a split vote on council, with none of us there.
Yeah, and I think that happens more often than people. I think what we've tried to start doing is telling people, hey, if you came to this planning commission meeting, please come to planning and zoning. At least that's what I hope happens now, because I'm just going to speak frankly with you. What happens at some of these meetings is there's no one out there that's going to be opposing your viewpoint on this, or like trying to like, hey, we want to keep this scenic. So you have, when it gets to the council, like, hey, maybe we can create something that's a resource for the entire community. Let's figure out a way. Let's see if we can get council on board. So you have kind of different conversations at the committee level than you do maybe at the commission level, where if there are people in the crowd, I will see unanimous votes to appease the crowd, so to speak, at those types of meetings.
To your point about creating a benefit for the community, I think it's an important one. You know, we pay taxes obviously for benefits that accrue across the rest of the community, right? We pay for Woodland, we pay for Rivercrest, great. We're the people who in theory would benefit most from this investment because we are most proximate. And we're telling you we do not want that, right? So I think it needs to be taken into consideration, right? We're already paying for investments around the city, and we take advantage of those. And the folks who are closest to those typically reap the most benefits from those in terms of property value and some of those other things, right? And we're telling you we don't want those. The trade-off of that benefit isn't enough to offset the negative for us, the people who would benefit most from that, because it's most proximate to us. So I think that has to be taken into account. as we go forward.
I would assume it would be.
I think it's something we want to hear from everyone. I know that, and no offense when I say this as well, is we have 5 neighbors here, and there's a lot of other neighbors we would want to hear from on this as well.
I'm sure you'll hear.
But yeah,
There's more of us out there.
And I'm sure there is, and we want to hear from everyone on what this is, how this is going to impact. And in all fairness, it's,
Yeah.
there's,
We need the full.
there's not just Cocorp, but there's Hawthorne, there's the River's Edge, and there's other areas that are going to go in there.
I think the other thing you have to think about, right, it's different for the Hawthorne folks. Wanda, they've lived here since 1995. It's a completely different proposition when you're just moving in versus when you've been there and paid extra money for something. So I just think that's.
And unfortunately, I can't speak to a promise that was made by
Yeah, no,
someone else who didn't even own the property at the time either. And I feel for you on that one. That's something that I've heard something like that before over in that neighborhood, is that there was a conversation on that, and I'm just surprised someone would make a.
There's no agreement.
No.
We have searched the files to try and document what we're hearing said, but everything that we've heard over the years is anything from my neighbor told me, my real estate agent told me, Mr. Dole told me, but there was never any documentation between the person selling the property, the organization buying the property, that was in an agreement that we could find.
It was in the messenger journal.
So,
But that was not a legal document.
so just a couple comments if I may.
No, if you-
So, I think, I really feel bad about what these stub streets are gonna do for the traffic near you. And of course, that was addressed in 2015, that was part of the greater plan, and that's gonna be unfortunate. The way I view this particular passive park, if that's what comes to be, it's gonna be a lot like Bicentennial, if any of you have ever been there, which is, it's a neighborhood park. They have a couple small parking lots that allows outsiders to come in, but it's generally used by the people that live around that. It's a pretty big park and pretty big area that it serves. That's how I envision it, which until we see it on paper, we won't know that that's, because I think Bridges used 6 to 8 parking spots. So that's how I kind of interpret this developing, and not in terms of the baseball diamonds and the softball diamonds, but in terms of the neighborhood, because this can be limited parking from my perspective.
and you guys, like, I think you'll end up, if you guys are on that committee or you choose to be involved, which I don't know how we selected the Whirlings. There were quite a few people there giving
looking at the
input, and I think it's pretty much open to anybody that's willing to come. And it sounds like, most of you would be, but I think at this point, you're not sure what you're saying no to yet. Because
Because we don't know what it's gonna look like.
Yeah.
I mean, what I find a bit of troubling is that you keep saying we don't know what it's going to be. You're telling us there's 6 to 8 parking spots already, right? It seems like, we already know there's going to be a walking trail. Like, it already seems like a lot of this is already, we each have visions of what this is going to be already, right? And I think that is a bit disingenuous, honestly, to say, hey, we're going to pay $82,000 for a design study when you already sort of have the elements in mind.
And I think we have that, I think that's part of an initial meeting, but the 82,000 is part of the process, if I'm understanding that correctly, where I think there are general specs that we hand off, and that those are, the way I understood it was, hey, we might wanna, we don't wanna touch the woods, how can we utilize the woods? I think naturally you go to a walking trail, do we want this to be a big park? No, so how do we keep it so it's more of a neighborhood? Well, let's have a small parking lot. I think those are the boilerplate conversations that are happening right now.
I want to ask a quick question to Bridget on this property as well. How is this property currently being maintained?
Well, currently the wooded area is not being maintained, obviously, at all. And I think we are still having, the original owner of the property was farming some of it at one time, but I don't even know if they're still doing
And it's
that.
so far,
But
it's a little
that's-
dusty in September.
Well, I'll say 1/3 is farm field, 2/3 is woods, and the farm field area is being, we have an agreement with the former owner, which I think was Pam, well, at one point by the, Pam Andy is farming it, and I think she was farming it when it was Dole's property back in the day as well. So she's been farming until there's, houses coming in. is our agreement.
It's been scenic park, how are we farming? How do we do that?
So there's no, are you talking now?
Yeah.
I think there's just like wild grass over there, or?
No,
There's a small
It's-
section that's been farmed since the beginning of time before I got here.
Okay, and that will be,
That's the east.
that's where the,
The east end going towards fire.
okay.
So your question was, I'm sorry,
If it's been designated scenic and a park, that we know about, but anyways, how are we farming it each year? How does, where's that money going? Like, I'm just always making.
How's that a compatible with? So, yeah.
Yeah.
is
It's
it,
been farmed since before it was ever transferred over to the
non-conforming
city.
use right now.
and I
So I think it's
don't,
a non-conforming use.
I don't know the particulars, but you know, where the soccer fields are on 199 that the school owns, just south of that, that's being farmed as well. So it's, usually, there's gonna be utilization of that land. And hopefully, we're earning some revenue for the city with what we're farming. So, because we kind of known that this is a temporary situation until Hawthorne moves in, right? I mean, they're gonna take that area. But I want to go back to Betty and Jerry Howell. And I remember when they donated that land, the word I heard was preservation. And because I said, Jerry, why did you give that to the city? And he goes, because I trust the mayor, and I think they'll preserve it. So therein lies scenic, some parks can be preservations. And so there's words here that can mean the same thing. So his hope would it would be preserved, because he could have sold that with Hawthorne at the same time. But he wanted those woods preserved. So how we define that, I think, is going to be, is part of what we have to all of us figure out. And because going to what Corey was saying, it's 20 acres. And the city has to decide what they're going to do with it. I mean, it's city land that somehow has to be utilized or not. And that is part of our responsibility. So, and if I have any say, it's going to be, hopefully, going to be very similar to what Bicentennial is, which is a neighborhood park, but yet has, so that's a Barry comment. So, yes.
And I've been to Bicentennial Park a few times, and I would want our park to be like Bicentennial in that it's not nature preserve.
Yeah, and I only use it, I only, you're
It
right.
does have a parking lot. And there's
No. And I only use Bicentennial from the standpoint that it's very limited parking, so that it's a neighborhood park. I tried to say that it's not baseball diamonds and it's not a basketball court, so it's not, this would not be that in my mind.
If you go to Bicentennial, and I think the point you're trying to make, right? Because I lived over by Bicentennial
live
Park.
there now.
John lives there now. I think the point he's trying to drive home is if you go to Bicentennial Park and you're on the playground, you're running into someone that lives right next to Bicentennial Park. So I think that's the
Yeah,
larger point.
that's my analogy.
Because most people in the city probably do not know that park exists, and if they do, they're not sure how to get there. I don't know how you do that with this particular one. Maybe that'll be part of the conversations later.
Keeping the blame, you know?
Yeah, but I think you also run into, and this is not a threat by any means, but you're running into it where you have elected officials that change. The history is somewhat forgotten, right? So the longer this sits there, you might run into, 10 years down the line, we said, all right, hey, we're keeping this scenic. And then you have a nice wooded lot that a developer offers Perrysburg some sort of land swap for, and it sounds appealing. And I don't know that can happen, that will happen, but putting it to use is probably a more preservative tactic, potentially, too.
So, that was gonna be one of my questions then. What is more secure for us, to have something designated and done with, like a natural park, or like you said, because we've already run into this for many, many years. We keep new people, new ideas, but it's the same old idea to develop this as a park. And I get what you're saying about someone could come in and want to buy it, and then we would be stuck with housing behind us instead of a natural presentation. So one of my questions was, are you telling us the best way to preserve it is to make it into this park you're proposing? And number two, which I really would like to ask, because we were kind of thrown with the road thing, that we thought we had a voice and we really didn't, it had already been decided. Can you guys be upfront and tell us now, is it going to be a park? Is there any chance at all of it remaining scenic, or in your minds, what you see, is it going to be a park?
I'm not sure the question, is it scenic as in just keep
Is it
it?
a
No,
done
not
deal, or
scenic.
I guess
I
what
mean-
we're trying to find out?
Yeah,
Like, are we
because,
wasting our time?
yeah, because we went to 2 meetings in 2014, I did anyway. And we were fighting against this road that was gonna take part of the woods and be invasive, just to connect the two neighborhoods. Only to find out in the end of the second meeting, where, I don't know, I don't even remember who you're talking to, but it was like they were kind of tired of all of our things that we were bringing up, and they said, well, you can't do anything about the road anyway, we've already entered an agreement with Hawthorne. And it was like, why were we coming here then, for 2 meetings? So that's what my question is. We want it to remain scenic, not developed. How much of a chance is there of that? Is that a possibility, or pretty much is that gone?
So, yeah, no, I think you're,
Did spend $80,000 to do nothing? I don't think so.
So it sounds to me like you guys all want it to be a park, but a passive park. Am I reading that right?
I would say me personally, yeah, so, I don't have any views. I could ultimately vote against something. But I do have a general philosophy: when there's a city resource that's owned, it's best to use that resource in a way that's agreeable if you can do that. But there is a long process. So no, the simple answer is no, my mind's not made up. But am I more likely to vote for a park out there than you would like? Absolutely, that's probably the case. Do I want to spend $80,000 and watch it burn? No, we want to put taxpayer money to good use.
We don't want you to do that all the time.
Yeah, so I think we're starting a conversation, but you have to realize on this side of things, anytime we want to put in a new multi-use path, what my experience may be is I have citizens that come up here and say, do not do this, this will ruin my parking, this will ruin my land value. And you know what, sometimes I have to deliver the hard truth is, hey, we need to make our city more accessible without a vehicle, so that these bike trails can get you from Co-Court to downtown, and that's what we're working on right now. And people don't like that necessarily when the project's in their neighborhood, but when I leave here, I may get hell for making that decision in front of people that don't want it to happen. But when I leave here, I get compliments saying, hey, this multi-use path that you did, that was great. And you might get that, and those people aren't going to show up to the meetings. So it's hard for us to gauge the actual people for and people against. And so when the experiences is like that, so it kind of leads to my general philosophy, hey, we have a resource here that is unique. It's wooded, and we do not have a park in Perrysburg that is wooded currently, other than Orleans.
Is Nice Preserve City?
No, that's the township as well.
No, township as well. So, we're looking for ways to maximize those resources and appreciate the gift that was given to us with that. But yeah, some people aren't gonna like it, absolutely. And yeah, I think I probably am more open to it than you would like. But has my mind been made up? No, I want you guys to be engaged in that process and helping control that too. Because your opinion, you're living right there. But I guarantee it's not going to hurt your land value at the end of the day. I don't think we would go for a park that's going to hurt your land value.
In my backyard, pretty much.
So that will be stuff we'll need to address. Yeah, that's stuff we'll need to address.
I would feel much more comfortable with this whole thing if there were some other kind of zoning designation. I know nobody wants to go back to what the zoning does, but
We're doing that right now, actually.
Yeah, no, yeah.
good. Then I'm glad we're doing that. But something that was a passive park designation, because what really worries me is and it is already a park, And like you just said, Corey, right, if the next group of city council members come in and decide, hey, we really want to build this park out, there's nothing to stop it, right? And so that for me is my biggest concern with this, is not necessarily what we're doing with this wooded passive park. For me, it's the slippery slope of what comes next that really worries me about my land value. So something that would protect against that and keep it, and really sort of lock in what the previous landowner wants, what you've got, with the intent you guys have of the passive park, even though I disagree with it. I still think doing that would give us a lot more comfort of what to expect in the future.
It might be something to have at the next plan and zoning committee, or just say that.
Well, I know we are looking at, so we're reviewing the land use plans.
Sorry, I keep interrupting.
I
You
know,
wanted
I
to
keep
say
talking.
something?
That's okay. That's a great point. I'm sitting here thinking, whatever we do, because we need to preserve more woods in this environment, and how I don't know how to do that, but that's a great point. And you would ask about where we were with this. I wanted to answer your question. I do think one of our responsibilities is to make sure that we're utilizing city resources, and this is a city resource. And $82,000 for this study is unbelievable. Just, none of us would spend that kind of money on a study of a wooded area and what we want to do with it. That's the environment that the city government is in. So when that comes back, it may tell us that there can be one loop-de-doop, or maybe a crisscross. I don't know what any of that's going to look like. Jerry gave it to the city and Betty to preserve it. And I think we can preserve it, because that was his hope. That's why he gave it to us. And it can be scenic, it can be a park, and it can be preserved. But until we spend $82,000, we don't know what it's going to look like. But so that's my answer to you, that I'm inclined, for reasons I just tried to say yes. But I don't know if it's going to be a mess, if it's just going to be a bunch of trails running through there, then it's not going to be preserved and it's not going to be appropriate. But how we can secure this into the future is a great question and a great point.
And I think that would be something so Barry and I serve on planning and zoning together as well. And we're reviewing the land use plan. If you haven't looked at it, I'd encourage you to look at it. There's some cool projects or things that we're trying to set up for different parts of the city for development and different types of uses. And one of the things it sounds like we're gonna try to be proactive about is potentially looking at the zoning categories. Because we're running into, right now, if we have an office and service, you may be able to have an office on the bottom and then residential, but we don't really have a classification for commercial with apartments above it and things like that to help encourage those things. So I would be absolutely open to exploring language for creating natural parklands and things like that. Absolutely, I think that's a great idea.
And to your concern about the parking lot, because it sounds like that's, the city has very strict tree island, and so I'm going to suggest to you that there will, because you can't hardly do anything in the city without having, certain sized arborvitaes and certain number of trees.
Got rid of all those trees so I could see. I
So-
spent a whole summer and it's all.
But I'm just saying, the city is not going to, the city won't make you stand there without some protection. So,
What's to stop it going from 6 parking spots, say this is a big hit, and now we need 12, because we got people parking out in front of our houses now, and now we got them in front and the back.
it goes to our ability to lock this down.
So we're even talking parking spaces locked down.
Well,
I think what we're talking about is there's limited space.
Yes.
So almost preventing the growth because of the spatial limitations. And I think all these conversations will happen organically through the process, or I'm hoping it will. And that it's ultimately something you're like, oh, I didn't necessarily think about this feature, or how my kids might like this resource, or how the schools might be able to utilize this for classroom things. And it might get you excited. I know I wasn't necessarily too concerned about what we're doing in Norlands Park, and then I showed up at a meeting, and I'm like, I want this and I want this now, okay? So it's just interesting once you get in the process how you're.
My question about, this is my day job, is doing these kind of studies, so the $82,000 that you paid for the study.
We haven't paid anything yet.
Okay.
It's proposed.
Proposed,
Okay.
yeah.
When you do that, is there a public engagement process that's built into that 82,000, or is it they just put together designs and then show us, and then we get?
So if I recall correctly, there are 2 public meetings on this that would be incorporated with this. Now, again, we haven't spent anything yet. Right now, we're having a conversation. To your point of where we stand on this, I would love to see us explore this resource as well. I don't want us, so as someone who lives by Bicentennial Park and lived by Bicentennial Park for, 10, 11 years, in different capacities, interestingly enough. It is a great community park. When we go there, honestly, even if we take the kids to the little playground there, there's many times where we're the only people in that whole park. The only time we ever have any parking issues is when there's a ball game. And there wouldn't be, at least I wouldn't want us to see this where this developing into a sports complex type of a park. I want to see find a way to keep this natural, but keep this inviting. It is a resource that as the Hawthorns continues to build and get closer to it, they're going to see the land, there's going to be some want and needs. And if there's a way to create a capacity to have some sort of being scenic and usable for them would be beneficial. I know that Rivercrest is close for you, but for those in Hawthorne, there isn't really much that's going to be as close for them. And again, I'm not trying to say that anybody's more important than anybody else, but this is something that I think is worth exploring, but I really want to get feedback from everyone with this and have all parties involved with this to make this something that works. And I guess in one of the conversations I actually want to sit down and talk with Brody on it, and Bridget a little bit more, is the cost and the proposal that we have to say, hey, if we're doing something that's scenic, maybe this is a little too much. Let's see what we can look at on that as well.
Because I think that's a fine point, because once you sink that kind of money in, I think it is way more likely that you're gonna feel obligated to follow through.
And this is a long, Joanne, I want again, a long, thin area, and it's not dense at all. You can see the houses on the other side of the forest there. It's not a densely forested area, it's just long and thin. So and it floods all the time, so it's gonna be very interesting to see what.
That's the other part of this. This is wetland.
Yeah.
Interesting enough, Bicentennial is a wetland at certain points of the year too, so there's been a lot of, I run all the time and I've gone through there. I know not to run through there after the rains because there's certain parts of the path that are still underwater. And Bicentennial, I think, is about 17 acres too, so it's actually a little bit smaller of an area.
I guess, back to my point last about the study would be, I think it would be beneficial for us to have input earlier while they're designing, rather than them come up with 3 options, none of which we may like, right? Or may not have even thought about the things we're interested in. I think building that into the process earlier would get us a better set of outcomes that we could then,
That's what I would like to see too.
Yeah, I think we're all on the same page on that.
And I can tell you that in the past, I know the city spent a lot of money on a design for a park that never went anywhere. That was before I got on council. It was the one there was a study done in Orleans and Rivercrest with zip lines and amphitheater down there. I recall just so much stuff was thrown into it. What's that?
It was done in 2011, but finalized right as I was coming on board in July of 2012.
But nothing ever came from that.
No, we've taken bits and pieces to help upgrade, like Riverside Park, got to the full conceptual potential that was envisioned in that master plan.
That amusement park we had.
Correct. And looking at some of those same concepts that were in that original study in Orleans Park as we're going through this second reiteration.
Mm-hmm. So I want to see you involved with this if we go forward with this. So this is still an if. There's still 4 other members of council as well. We still want to look and have the conversation to bring this into something that could be more palatable, even with the cost aspect. We put the $83,000 because that was one of the estimates that we got back from.
Yeah, we got a ballpark estimate. We asked one engineering firm just to give us an idea so that we could give it to city council for them to consider. So we don't have anything hard and fast. In this particular case, if council approves funds, we would have to go through an RFP process, negotiate a price point, and that price point could be below that, could be beyond that, and we would have to go back to city council at the end of the day, no matter what's going the contract.
And I think logistically, because I think we're maybe wrapping up the conversation for today's purposes, this is going to be a long conversation. Logistically speaking, I believe we're on our third reading of the ARPA funds allocation at the next council meeting. So if you do not like what was said here, I don't think we're voting or making a recommendation, so to speak, but we wanted to get you in the proper venue of the people that are generally speaking about parks. There will be a council meeting where those ARPA funds are voted on, and that will be the next council meeting. It'll be the third and final reading. I would assume we're gonna make a vote as to how to allocate those funds for the time being. That can be amended down the line, that can, but if you wanna say your piece to the entirety of council on who's voting on making a pitch of taking those funds out of there, I wouldn't fault you for doing that, but that's your venue.
And Bridget, if you can correct me if I'm wrong here, really passing this resolution, the ARPA, is more of showing the public of ideas we want to use the fund for. It actually doesn't require any spending of those funds for those specific items. It's saying this is what the intended use is, and that can change at any time. So having it in there for McKinley Woods doesn't mean that money has to be spent on McKinley Woods. That money could go to another park project that is on that list as well.
I have a question about that, because it was in Facebook today. There's a question about putting in heated restrooms.
That's something I've been pushing for too, so don't worry about that.
No, that
I actually have it down as my other business to have that. I mentioned that specifically with the ARPA funds as well. And it was on one of the short lists. We still need to find out on the cost of those because I'm also a member of Rotary, and Rotary donated that bathroom and the pavilion. And I guess none of us really thought to think about the heating aspect of it. And
So procedurally with the ARPA funds, so if we came to the council meeting and set our fees, would there be a place where, I know you said it's not sort of specific, it's like a budget guideline. Would there be a way for us to ensure that in the RFQ process, there were a certain number of public engagement forums, et cetera, that would be built into that, or would that be something we would work with?
that would be with here.
And I'll say this, I will definitely reach out to Derek when I see this on an agenda again.
Yeah,
So- No,
You can't have alcohol in public parks. I'm just gonna.
My bag's out of park.
we didn't extend the door.
We didn't extend the door there yet.
So,
I was curious though, those funds, now, did that include like a traffic study?
That's not necessarily on there. I don't know what we have set aside. So I know you're talking more of the Cove Street, and I've walked the neighborhood. I've talked to people. I know somewhere.
There is
I
a
remember
traffic
coming to your
study
home.
That was done for Hawthorne. It was required of them to do a traffic study on Fort Meigs Road. That study I think was done in 2016. And as we were actually sitting here, I just emailed the recommendations that came out of that traffic study for improvements to Fort Meigs Road. I just sent it to my city engineer and asked him if we should request the developer to update that traffic study, given not just the development of Hawthorne, but the development that's going on south of Hawthorne, down Fort Meigs Road, to see if we need to refresh that.
My guess, you guys are seeing a lot of speeders at that initial drive.
There's so many kids.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
scary.
I can imagine. I don't ever really have a reason to drive through there.
I'll share with you. We looked at a house on Cove Court, and two houses in, and we didn't buy it because I know how fast people go down there.
It talks about the needed connections, I think, to Ringgold Wire, but also the improvements that would need to be made at Cove Court and Fort Meigs.
okay.
But again, that traffic study was done also prior to our new fire station locating out there as well, so.
Okay.
So that's something you have to take into
I've asked for
consideration.
a refresh on that.
My guess is that our intent, at least on this side, would not be that this park is going to generate more traffic, so to speak.
No, they're almost two
Yeah.
separate issues.
Yeah, so, but I think the other one's really important because if that's disturbing to me,
It's
especially if school buses are.
It's just right out there. I understand that, and that's hopefully something that have conversations with our chief and the safety committee and with Bridget. And I know that it sounds like they're working on some of that with the engineering study side of it. I wish I had a solution right now for you. But the way government works is you need to have the studies in place first in order to do what's
The
required.
challenge with that intersection is when you have a three-legged intersection, the trip counts that you need for ODOT to warrant a traffic signal typically aren't there.
So just a thought process with the fire station there, what about having a light to the north of the fire station, one to the south of the intersection there, and have that as a way that, and this is something we might have to have a conversation, because I think about other areas where I've seen a fire station where they have its own traffic signal in front of the fire station.
Like a Hawk system of some sort.
Yeah, and then eventually incorporate that into
Strangely
an
enough, our
actual.
firefighters don't complain about the traffic,
Okay,
because I mean, people are typically stopping for them. So it's not like the general population is either going in and out of Concord or traveling down Fort Meigs Road. But I think that the traffic study, and it's been a long time, if I remember correctly, one of the things that they obviously looked at is, would that warrant another traffic control device of some sort at that intersection of Cone and Fort Meigs, based on what they were projecting the traffic patterns to be. But again, that was 7 years ago.
yeah, then lots changed.
So
And I'm sure
a lot
you-
has happened since then, so I think it is responsible of either also the developer to take a fresh look at that, given with what's the developments that's happened in that area.
I'm guessing the last couple of months have been rough too with River Road shut. I'm sure you guys are getting.
Well, the other thing to keep in mind is all of our kids are walking to Fort Meigs, and realistically, none of them walk, but most of them drive. So they get right, so there's a ton of that traffic as well, but then in the afternoon, they do walk off.
So, Go-Court is just a drag race.
Yes. We have a lot of people with mufflers that like to
I
fly.
mean, and I've been on there when people have flown down that street. Bridget is, and I know we don't like speed bumps in the wintertime because of snow plows.
And also emergency vehicles are,
So there would not be an opportunity to put speed bumps on Go-Court.
what I can do is I can add Concord to our traffic committee that we have internally. It's comprised of myself as the safety director, our city engineer, chief of police, fire chief, as well as the service director. And so we look at, on a monthly basis, we look at calls or emails that have come in, but I could add this to our topic
We
of
got at least-
conversation, because then I can have Chief Jones pull crash data or data from the GET system. I don't know if we get traffic ticket data, but I can certainly find out what other kind of information we can provide to have a discussion.
So we have 5 neighbors right now that want to see something, so.
And my guess is your entire neighborhood would probably like to see something.
Maybe it's the,
What were you going to say, sir?
I was John Hayes, 2230, even stop signs are not noted, but loaded lane, something, if speed bumps weren't an option. Because there's no stopping, it's straight through, there's no reason for it to slow down.
Right.
Literally speed elevate one or the other, you call that feedback.
It's crazy.
And what's unfortunate is, it's typically people who live in the neighborhood who are doing that. So, I mean, it's obviously speed is voluntary compliance, I mean, that's reality. But we can certainly talk about that at our next safety committee meeting, which is, I think is already scheduled for next month, May 12th.
Good.
Has there been any consideration for like an off-site parking area? Because by the all-inclusive park that was put in, there was a house that was knocked down, there's a garage that remains. If the garage was removed, it'd be a nice spot for a parking lot.
We had a lot of conversations on on that spot, so that the city did purchase that property, and it is corporate the park there now. We're actually upgrading that whole parking lot over in Rotary Park to bring it up to code, because it isn't up to code right now. And we're also closing off that access to the Y.
Oh,
So you're one of the people that we're getting complaints on.
that's how I got around the runners.
So that's going to be closed off. Unfortunately, there were some bad actors that were using it, and I know even with this closing down on River Road, I sit on the cemetery board. I was over there today, and one of the employees told me someone flew right through there and almost hit her. They're cutting through the cemetery to try to get around that, which is can't do. But she came out to go pick up some trash, and the car was going down the multi-use path. So. And almost took her out. So, I mean, it's just, yeah, I mean, unfortunately, bad actors always make it hard for the rest of us.
But where that garage is, where the house used to be, that's not actually part of the park. It's actually city-owned, and I think it's used like a service
Currently,
area.
we stored a couple of the pieces of equipment that we utilize to mow that big stretch of land over there across the street at Rivercrest, instead of trailering the Batley mowers over there.
So one of the things with the offsite parking there too is we had some conversations, I think I mentioned something like that before, and what I was told is we really don't want, we want as little impervious surface as possible to allow for the water, and we don't want to turn everything into a concrete pad is what they said, and whatever we can do to work on that even with this, let's see what we can do, so.
That's what you're doing to me, is you're treating the concrete pad, and
Well, I don't even know what's going to go in there.
I
I understand where you're coming from.
yeah.
Bring it
And
up.
Outside the
You
box.
can bring it up at the steering committee tomorrow.
Big outside box here, you know.
Well,
Yeah.
there are pervious pavements, types that don't look like asphalt.
I had someone suggest to me once before about having a natural parking lot, but that's something that isn't currently in our code.
Well, we allowed it over 577. That's kind of an impervious, right?
Impervious
So
parking lot.
that would be a little bit better.
Plenty of things that we can have conversations.
Yeah, it's hard to have the conversation when we don't know yet. It's part of it
next
too.
steps are staying engaged, right? I mean,
Yeah.
let's assume the study gets passed.
And Russell, I got your email. So if I know that we got something coming here, I'll reach out to you too. Usually I'm pretty good with doing that. And I've sat on other committees where I've had to do that. I saw that.
I'll keep in touch, make sure.
Even for those who
We
are.
started a Facebook group in the neighborhood, so I'll share everything that I.
Okay. And is there a way that we could possibly put them just on the agenda email for the recreation committee? Put him on, when we send the agendas out, I know that we send the agendas out to media and those who request it. I would say, why don't we just add you onto that way you get the
Yeah, I can
agenda.
give you an email address, I'll ask the,
But I'll just post on the Facebook thing, I think it's the easiest way.
That's about, yeah.
Arnold, 76.
So you can write down so we don't have it on the public record, because
Yeah, sure. God doesn't have spam on it.
we'll sign you up for everything, so don't worry.
Yeah.
But no, I appreciate it. So thank you everyone for coming out. Again, nothing has even been decided yet. We haven't spent any money. Whatever we allocate for this ARPA fund, it's a resolution. It's not even really an ordinance dictating anything for the budget. It's just saying what we want to see some things done, and we want to see things done in a more permanent fashion in other parts of our community that we haven't really been able to focus on. I'll share with you as well is I've always had a lot of I don't want to say complaints, but concerns that we don't have enough parks out on the western side of town. And that's something that I've mentioned to Bridget on numerous occasions, and she's nodding her head, that I do want us to see if we can explore other options. I know that the Pratt Farms is at some point going to end up in it's a Wood County Park District, so it's not going to be part of the city. So it's not something that we would necessarily have access to, and that's going to be a great resource as well. But we still want to see what we can do for residents in the western side of town. And right now, this is, if you look at the maps, this is actually our furthest west area that is zone park. Even though Rivercrest is to the north, this is just barely beats it out. But it takes into account that we don't really have any parks really even south of 475. And is this necessarily the ideal location for something? No, I would agree with that, but it's at least a start for us to build on to something further down west. And as the property comes available, we do have funds, again, set aside for park acquisition. If this doesn't make sense or something, there's some other ways that we can find something down the road too, further west. But I think that one thing that all of us have heard is we do need something more on the west and the southwest side of town. Even though it's not ideally far away from a couple other parks, it's a start, and I personally want to see it kept as scenic as possible, and my long-running grant. So, but I appreciate all of you for coming out, and thank you, and we'll definitely try to keep you notified on anything if it comes up. So again, still an if, but
I'll be out. We'll grab a beer and take a walk out there.
not out in the park.
Yes.
I didn't confirm nor deny.
It's on the record here, so.
That I neither confirm nor deny.
You'll have to send me the security down there, I don't know.
All right.
Thank you.
Yep.
So, next item on the agenda is the PrAC meeting. We had a great PrAC meeting. Went and attended that. Got a lot of nice feedback from residents. There was some conversations that came up regarding a kickback wall. Is that the right term? I'm looking at
A kickball,
kick wall. So think of a wall you can go up to, kick a soccer ball, kick it back, tennis ball across.
is that Mr. David?
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's almost like a handball court, but.
pretty much. And
Okay.
apparently, it was mentioned there was one in Municipal Park at some point. Not saying there's anything we need to do on that now. I know that I saw this as maybe something we could have a conversation. We could apply for a grant from Wood County as a possibility because it's something unique that we don't have.
Did they indicate, you said municipal park?
The municipal park was where they said there was one before. I'm assuming it may have been attached to like the tennis courts or something, but it was probably decades ago. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, wow, okay, I don't know.
Yeah.
I didn't remember that.
It's something that would be nice and unique. I'm not sure what the use would be. I'd be curious to see any feedback anybody else have, but
Because right now the green space area is used by like 3 or 4 different young kids organizations throughout the summer for soccer.
mhm.
It just depends on the location.
And I do have the report here. I'll make sure to forward it over. They had a great organizational meeting. Mr. Harbaugh is now the president of PrAC. Was it Aaron? Because I know he wasn't there.
Finally,
He was voted in as vice president absentee. And Ms. Enninger is going to be the secretary moving forward. So
also voluntold, I think.
I think she kind of volunteered for it, but one thing that they like hearing from us on things that we're planning to do. So I'm going to try to keep them updated on various projects as we're moving forward with those. Overall, it's a good meeting, and there's some other feedback. I'll bring up another business question that came from one of the members after the meeting. But they're doing a good job of bringing up the issues they're seeing with the parks, and there's a couple issues that I'll bring up here at the end as well. Any questions on the report for PrAC? No? Okay. Summer recreation programs, I asked for this to be on the agenda. Last time we actually had a full conversation on rec on this was, I think, in 2019. I knew it's been several years, could have been
It was
even before
wrapping-
that.
I found my report, so
Was
it
it
was
18?
actually wrapping up that year's program.
Okay,
So what we did is, we have a wrap-up from 2021
okay,
as a handout. What we thought we would do is maybe prior to the rec programs actually starting this year, that maybe we could have Mr. Brook come in and kind of give an update on how the registration went, what classes have filled up, what does not seem to be a popular class, and then maybe bring him back then at the end and have him do a wrap-up on what actually happened throughout the course of the program. So maybe twice a year, we can kind of get in a cycle.
and
The
though we're using a
beforehand-
different program now too.
Yes, so I think in my council update last week, I may have mentioned it. So we went to a program called Rec Desk. And so it's totally online. What used to be a paper copy of a rec brochure, rec program, that's now online as well. You can go to our city SEP website, click on the link to go to the brochure and or program, gives a description of all the different programs, the days of the week it is. And then there's also a separate link that you register at this portal through Rec Desk, and that allows you to have access to actually register for programs. So everything is completely online, all payments are online. And I think that last page of that document, the first day for residents to register was this past Monday. And that first day, there was like 1,600 different registrations for programs totaling like $15,000. So very successful so far. And I think the non-residents can start registering on Monday.
And so with the rec desk as well, is this something that could be expanded to other
Already
things we
working
want
on
to
it,
do? Okay.
Mr. President. We actually have our other facilities such as the Shaller and our park shelters are getting queued up right now. Nathan is working on that as well as Amber on the payment side, because that's a little bit different because we take deposits for rentals and we're making sure we have the process down to return that deposit, by checking off a checklist that typically happens at the service division, how they transfer that information over to us, and then how we refund back onto the credit card in which it was put on. So we're working on that process and hope to launch that in the next couple of weeks. And then we also want to look at rolling that out probably for next year for those little rentals that we do for like our garden plots, our kayak canoe slips. So we're progressing and making it more paperless and a lot easier with the financial transaction side. So we're not sitting there exchanging monies. It's all online, goes right to finance, and they're taking care of all that.
I heard that, they said what canoes are almost all filled up or?
As of the end of last week, I think there was 3 slips left, so I haven't heard the update on that, and all the garden plots were gone. That morning, there's literally a line out the door at 7 o'clock in the morning. Who knew it was so popular? Yeah, but they all went, so it's a successful program.
Any thoughts at any point in the future of expanding this even into certain fields or anything of that nature? Because I know that was the PABSC does our baseball fields. Who handles our soccer fields?
Soccer fields, we have probably, it's handled through my office.
Okay.
And we have probably 7 different organizations that we work with. Anybody from PYSA, GTFC, PSC, Soccer Shots, St. Rose, Perrysburg Schools, and I'm missing somebody, I can't think of it right now. It's another, I think, little small kids organization. So we rent for free the fields between all of them that are at Rivercrest for soccer. Sometimes we do bicentennial, but right now bicentennial, we put a hold on this year because we know there's going to be some improvements and we didn't want them to get in the thick of their thing and then kind of kick them off because we're going to do a playground and try to deal with some of the drainage issues out there. And then also that green space over at Municipal Park is utilized for soccer for small kids.
Okay. So, but no one has to pay to do those rentals?
Correct. We just try to manage it so we don't overutilize the field space. So we try to only have 4 days a week for any given field to give them time to rest. So we don't overuse them because none of them have watering systems or anything. So we're trying to be careful of that. But typically we have more requests than we can respond to. But everybody wants to be on the fields. We have lacrosse is utilizing Rotary. We have a couple different yoga groups who utilize Riverside Park on the weekends in the early mornings for both fitness training and yoga.
I do have, I guess, a question, because this was one of the concerns.
Club for baseball,
was-
subletting through PABSC.
This is one of the concerns that was sent to me, is that one of the organizations that would be getting that field rental for free is a for-profit organization. Do we?
Many are.
Many are, okay. Because that was one of the concerns is, are we doing anything different for-profit or nonprofit? But if everything's the same as free, then there's.
Everything's the same.
Okay.
It makes it easier.
We
And
changed
you
that.
have to define what for-profit is and what not-for-profit is.
But they just not-for-profit as
Because
anything.
not-for-profit is still in many ways for-profit. If they pay people, that is almost a for-profit enterprise. And many of those soccer organizations do charge a fair amount of money and they do pay staff people. Unlike PABSC, who seems to be all volunteers with the exception of one part-time person that does their field work, and they charge a lesser amount of money than some of the soccer organizations. So, where do you start, where do you end?
No.
So we've just taken the approach at this point in time, as long as we can provide adequate field space for home teams, so to speak, as well as some other organizations, we're happy to do so.
Because with going into this rec desk, I think this is great. I think this is a great opportunity to add more. Is that something we may be looking to make some changes on down the road, or?
In terms of the field utilization?
Field use and fees or anything?
Perhaps, because we have a lot of forms and documents that we have folks fill out, waivers from every child that plays to protect ourselves from the eventuality that somebody steps in a little ruts, sprains an ankle. But it's certainly something we can explore. And we require different levels of insurance for those utilizations versus a park shelter.
So PABSC schedules their own fields, correct?
So PABSC, we give them the authority on the city's behalf to schedule not just those fields at Rivercrest, but the fields at Municipal Park, including Meyer Field. We then give them the ability to sub-schedule to other organizations,
Right.
such as the high school for Meyer Field. But those agreements with Perrysburg Schools in this instance still have to come to the city and we still sign off on it. So we are still a one-to-one relationship with who's ever going to be on the field. But we use their scheduling ability as the overarching entity to handle that.
But whereas on lacrosse, soccer,
Just deal directly with us.
so when you have all these various travel soccer teams, in-house soccer teams, they have to actually go through who?
They go through
Schedule?
administration. We actually have
I
a
didn't
master
realize that was-
spreadsheet, and we have this like down to a science now.
Hopefully, it's better with.
The rec desk.
Yeah. So, yeah, we see a lot of opportunities with Rec Desk. So we're pleased it was suggested last year. The mayor gave us a directive that we were not to print one more recreation program, that he wanted it all online, and we made it happen.
If we're not seeing any down, we're still having more people registering this.
Charles Bergot was very impressed with the outcome of Monday. I think right now, we are up over 2,000 reservations for different programs, so he's very pleased with it.
Are we
And I
gonna
think
keep
nowadays-
pushing? Are we still gonna keep advertising that on social media? I've seen a
Yes,
couple
yes.
posts and that's.
Yeah,
like, very-
Marie has that scheduled out for like the next couple weeks,
Awesome.
or until Charles says, hey, we're full.
Perfect.
I'm assuming we have some advertisement in the messenger on that,
We
or?
had advertisements in the messenger. She did a press announcement that went to all print media as well as TV. And I think she said some people picked it up and had a little blurb out there, or put it on their own social media site as well as our social media sites.
No, I appreciate this. I would love for the recreation to have a end of year review and just some updates as we're coming in to know what new programs are coming in.
Yeah, yes, I think we could get that on cycle.
Okay, and I really like this rec desk. I think this is something, because one of my kind of personal goals is to see us try to get more easily connected to the public so they can reserve spaces and to
Yes.
turn us into a more formal recreation program as well at some point down the road.
Yes, we test drove a couple different products, but we ultimately let IT and the rec people pick the one that they wanted,
Okay.
since they're the ones who have to work with it all the time. But we were just, kind of part of that discussion.
So when it says families send questions via Facebook twice as often as email, who's
So-
responsible for the Facebook
So that
answering
is,
those
that is
questions?
Charles Bergode is responsible for the summer rec Facebook page, and he works in conjunction with our PIO. So they have found that to be a great tool, instead of trying to utilize a generic email address. So we still have the generic email address, but most people are contacting us via Facebook.
So an example would be someone says, a question coming through Facebook, it's, how does the PIO know to answer it versus Charles?
She allows Charles to answer all of them unless Charles emails her and asks for help on a particular question.
Okay.
Like if it's really not a rec program related question, but more maybe a city park question, he dumps that back over to her and then she confers with the correct person internally.
I just wondered how much time is spent on that, so.
I think Charles probably, I could honestly say, handles 95% of all of them. Between him and Josh, his right-hand man.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions on this, or?
I just have one thing other business.
Yep, is it the same thing I had?
Right now.
Okay. I'll jump in real quick. So I appreciate these residents mentioning about the bathrooms. I had saw numerous people comment about our porta potties or porta johns, or you want to call them, at Rotary Park being very full. I know we've had some rain over the last few days, but I'm not sure. They said that it was pretty high up on there.
That should really have no bearing on that. That sounds like.
Unless they're just being overused.
That sounds like more of a function of whatever the cleaning schedule
Yeah.
is, whether they're adhering to.
But there was
it
a
or not.
lot of people complaining on that it was a little more sketchy to use it if they had to.
And this
I'm
was
trying to think of a
this
polite way to
past
put it.
weekend?
This past weekend, I know that, I think there were some complaints about Rivercrest as well, bathrooms not being open. And I understand as well that you can't really open those with the,
My understanding is that Rob's goal was to try and get those open before the end of last week.
okay.
So maybe with whatever, the tree stuff that they were doing, that they didn't get there, but I'll see him tomorrow morning at staff meeting and verify that those bathrooms are open now and find out about the schedule with the company that we lease those from, to make sure that they're adhering to their agreement with us
Okay.
on the maintenance of that.
I appreciate it, and I know that when we put that, Porta-John out, that it's all the way on the other side away from the actual playground. I know we don't want to necessarily have the smells by the playground, but if there's a way to keep one on the other side of the parking lot so families don't have to run a small child across a parking lot would be a nice added benefit, especially a little closer to where that, maybe even on the backside of the bathroom if it's closed in the winter in the future.
Okay.
But hopefully we can find some way to add some heat into that, so we don't have to keep that closed.
Rob is tracking that down right now. He's waiting for a quote, I believe, from Campbell,
Okay.
to see what that looks like. And then we plan on doing a walkthrough with IT, service with the electrician, as well as that company to have them lay it out for us visually so we can understand what the space, I'm assuming if it's possible, to understand what the space requirements are and to make sure that that does not prohibit us from expanding any technology out there in the future.
Okay. That's just the only feedback is just more complaints on that, but it's a good problem to have because it means a lot of people are using it. Yes. Corey, you said you had
I will
something?
take it in the spirit in which it is offered.
All right,
Yeah.
thanks.
So I had a conversation with my old neighbor, it was Dave, I think he goes by No, not Noe.
Doesn't have anything to do with knowing.
Yeah, I don't blame him for that. One of the things he mentioned was, and I used to live next to him, so I can kind of attest to some of the verbiage you'll hear when
He shared
people are
that with me
playing, yeah, frisbee golf. And I was thinking of ways that you can address, I think you kind of run into some free speech issues potentially, but maybe some sort of signage or a reminder that you are in a family-friendly neighborhood environment. And maybe that, huh?
The frisbee golf area in Woodlands?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I think it's probably pretty particular to that park. It wouldn't necessarily be a bad reminder at any of the parks, that,
I think we do have one comprehensive sign at the entrance to each park,
okay.
which probably states that, which is probably also in our codified ordinances. But I can talk to service about if there's a way to.
Maybe
some
hole
of the
number
tee
one of the
boxes.
frisbee golf might need a reminder that,
Yeah, but maybe there's a way to, on some of the tee boxes, to
Yeah.
add a sign.
yeah. I don't think it's a bad idea,
Mhm.
but I've definitely heard some language being flown or, provocative music, not necessarily the best setting for it.
And it's pretty wide open, so
Yeah.
that sound does
Yes,
travel.
you can definitely hear the F word travel quite clearly and bounce off the houses and come back. So,
We will see what we can get out there as a
Because
reminder.
there was almost an altercation over there and because of that.
Really?
Well, just because of the language and kids and so, yeah.
I probably would say something too if I was there with my kids and someone was.
Right.
yeah, so,
We'll see what we can do.
okay.
And maybe, maybe it's something that Marie can also, say something about parks in general, being open and being heavily attended, be mindful that they're family-friendly atmospheres.
Yeah, that wouldn't be a bad reminder.
It can't hurt.
I could use that reminder from time to time.
Especially when you're with Derek.
Yes, yes.
Anything else for the good of the business?
Nope.
All right, I will consider this meeting adjourned.